what we call Palm Sunday, of course, is we remember that Jesus rode through the streets of Jerusalem, and they all threw down the palm branches, and they shouted, Hosanna. And they were all excited because at that moment, they all thought they loved Jesus. At that moment, they all thought they loved Jesus. And then just a few days later, a strange thing happened. Jesus, of course, was preparing for what he was going to do, which was to die on the cross for the sins of the world. And they thought that he was coming as some kind of conqueror of Rome. And so as the week went on and Jesus was giving himself over to eventually Pilate, and the people saw it, and the Pharisees were all condemning him and saying he was not the Messiah, the people easily forgot how much they thought they loved him. And suddenly they didn't love him anymore, apparently, or at least it looked like they didn't love him. It looked almost like they hated him. And Pilate actually came out, of course, during the trial and said, do you want Jesus to be freed, this man whom I see no fault in him? Or do you want Barabbas, who was a known criminal, to be freed? And the people shouted, Barabbas, Barabbas. And so they freed Barabbas and not Jesus. And so it's a long way from love to hate. There's a big gap between love and hate. And when you're loving Christ, when he's coming down the streets of Jerusalem, and then by the end of the week you don't love him anymore, that's a serious situation. And how did that happen? Did it happen because they were looking for someone different? They weren't seeing him as who he really was? Did they not see him as who he really was? Yeah, I think that's what happened. They were looking for a conqueror of Rome. They didn't see him as the King of Kings and Lords of Lords. They didn't see him as the one that was going to lay down his life for the sins of the entire world. They didn't see him as that. They didn't see him for who he really was. So we have to see him for who he really is. So do we love Jesus? We have to make sure that we really do, and that we see him for who he really is. Because if we see him for who he really is, we will love him. People that don't know Jesus is because they've never seen him. They've never had that connection to see him for who he really is. And that was what happened there. And it can happen to anyone in our day and time too, until they see him for who he really is. So we have to see him for who he really is.